Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Cover your ears. Kentucky fans, hide the children. We got to talk Georgia at Kentucky. Georgia is a 24.5-point favorite in this one. Unbelievable here. 24.5-point favorite. Georgia goes into Kentucky. The over-under in this game is 45.5. It's going to be a night game at Kroger Field. So you hope that the fans come out. By the way, I see the ticket resale price is going a little bit down. So you wonder how much Kentucky fans are willing to show up after what they saw last week against South Carolina. And as I said, and I did a segment on it on the YouTube channel earlier this week, it feels like last week was a turning point for the Kentucky fan base. Mark Stoops has always kind of had this unwritten agreement. We might not beat Georgia. We might not beat the best teams in this league, but we're going to take care of the teams that we're supposed to. Well, he suffers a third straight loss to South Carolina this past weekend. Obviously Missouri has lapped him as a program. Still have success against Florida, so you got that going for you. 3 straight wins against Florida. But it was a frustrating game for Kentucky fans, and Kentucky fans have every right to be frustrated with what happened to their team a week ago. I think the biggest thing that was just shocking to me, and it was shocking to everybody. Listen, I even had Kentucky fans say, Torres, you're underrating South Carolina's defensive line. Okay, that's cool. I get it. I did not think Kentucky was going to be that bad, though. By the way, listen, we could say, oh, it was only Southern Miss. But that first game of the year against Southern Miss, Kentucky largely did whatever they wanted when they had the football, put up 31 points in 2.5 quarters. So even if you thought, okay, maybe South Carolina's a little bit better than they're getting credit for, maybe Kentucky's a little bit worse, I did not see 183 yards of total offense for Kentucky. I did not see Brock Vandagriff going 3 of 10 passing for 44 yards. I don't blame him. The blocking wasn't good enough. And it's crazy because you see 139 yards rushing for Kentucky. You say, maybe it's not that bad. Well, here's the problem. They ran the ball 46 times, which means it's 3 yards per carry. This was just a game where everything that could go wrong did. You couldn't stay on the field on third down. You couldn't get stops when you needed to. South Carolina made big plays. South Carolina played confident. And again, as we just talked about with South Carolina in their game going into this weekend, they were in the backfield all day in this game, keeping Brock Vandagriff on their toes. Georgia, listen, I'd love to sit here and overanalyze the Tennessee Tech game from a week ago. Don't know that there's like a lot to really dive into. Georgia wins 48-3. It's a game where they scored on 7 of their first 8 possessions. The only possession they did not score on, it was right before that the first half ended, the clock ran out. And so Georgia's pretty good. We saw them against Clemson a few weeks ago. And that Clemson game, listen, we all watched it. You don't need me to go through, play by play. But Clemson, to their credit, was able to hang tough for a half. Georgia was able to pull away late because they just have more size, more speed, and more depth really was the issue with Georgia and Clemson. So going into this game, Georgia, a 24.5-point favorite. They got to cover. They got to win. They got to dominate. They got to embarrass Kentucky even more than they're already embarrassed. That's what's going to happen on Saturday, right? I actually don't quite see it this way. My best pick and my best bet is actually Kentucky plus 24.5. Listen, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like Kentucky is going to win this game. They are not. But I do think we have to be careful about judging teams at their absolute best and absolute worst, right? I'm just trying to think of an example, right? Colorado last year is probably a great example. We judged them at their absolute best, and people were saying, oh, are they a playoff team? No, they were never a playoff team, but they were not a 1-11, whatever. You get the point I'm trying to make. And so when I look at Kentucky, we are seeing them at the lowest possible moment that they could have. But as I said, I just don't think they're that bad. And as bad as it was against South Carolina, again, I'm not going to use Southern Miss as some indictment that Kentucky is way better than we think they are. But Brock Vandagriff, when he had time, looked pretty freaking good. Brock Vandagriff threw for 3 touchdown passes. Barian Brown is an NFL wide receiver. Dane Key is really good. I know that Georgia's secondary is filthy, but if you can just give him an ounce of time at home, he will be okay. And then again, the Kentucky defense, as bad as it was against South Carolina last week, really wasn't that bad. Gave up 250 yards against South Carolina, gave up 131 yards in 2.5 quarters against Southern Miss in week 1. And so I just don't think this defense is as bad as people think. And again, the defense wasn't even bad last week in the game against Georgia. And so when I look at this game, I look at it from both perspectives. And Georgia, listen, we could say whatever we want. They were a little bit sloppy early in that game against Clemson. Well, now it's week 3, back-to-back dominant wins. You're going on the road. It's a night game. Lot of blue. It's going to be loud. Listen, I know Kentucky fans are frustrated right now, but I also know Kentucky fans, by the time kickoff comes on Saturday, will show up. They'll be loud. Maybe have a few bourbon and whatever's, in the parking lot, and it's going to be loud. It's going to be a tough place to play. And I think from the Georgia perspective, a couple things. Tough place to play, first true road game. I get they played Clemson on a neutral, but let's not forget Clemson, of course, or that game was in Atlanta. I know Clemson is not a far drive, but it was mostly Georgia fans. So you're going on the road. And the other thing is what we talked about a minute ago with Alabama at Wisconsin. Georgia is a team that this coming week has a bye, and then next week has Alabama, excuse me. So for Georgia, is it about putting up 38 points and showing how great you are in week 3? Or is it about getting through this game unscathed, uninjured, and getting rest going into Bama, making sure nobody gets banged up? This is a sport, again, where the best teams are going to have to play 16 to 17 games in a season. I just don't see the scenario where Georgia cares about blowing out Kentucky. And so you factor that in. The other thing I will say, as somebody who's been doing these betting pods and betting picks every year for years now, for whatever reason, Kentucky always plays Georgia pretty tough at home. 2 years ago, final score was 14-3 when these two met at Kroger Field. The time before that, it was 16-6, 2 years ago, 14-3 in 2020. That was the COVID year when there weren't a ton of fans in the stands. And even the previous times before that, these aren't blowout games. Last year it was in Athens. This game isn't in Athens. It's in Kroger Field. It's in Lexington. It's going to be a good crowd. I think Georgia wins, 31-10, 28-10, something like that. They get out with the victory, but I don't think it's about style points. I think they get the victory. I do think Kentucky covers.